Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia and here on this channel we talk about writing, journaling, and productivity to help you curate a life that you love. So for today, it is mid-April as I'm filming this. I'm not quite sure when this video is going to be edited and come out, but recently I just celebrated the 2-year anniversary of my poetry book, The Lights Are On But Nobody's Home. I published this book back in 2019. It is a collection of poems that I wrote ranging from 2013 to up until 2019, and the poems tell a story about a friendship that started out pretty amazing and turned pretty toxic, and after losing that friend, it's about my journey to finding myself and rediscovering my own self-worth. Since the anniversary had just come up and I was kind of looking for another scrapbooking spread idea, I decided to create one for my poetry book. And this is something I've never done before, and I've never done a spread where you cut out words and put them on the pages, if that makes sense. So that was definitely something very different. But anyway, I don't want to make this intro too long, so before we get started, be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you like it and you want to see more scrapbooking content like this, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see more scrapbooking content like this. Anyway, let's go ahead and get on to the making of this scrapbook spread.
Alright, so here we go. Honestly, I was kind of nervous to do this spread, mostly because my poetry book holds a lot of meaning to me, and it's also one of those things where when it came to my scrapbook, I wanted to do it justice. I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't want to make something that felt too cheesy or too silly or too like promo, because that's not what I'm going for here, really. I just wanted to do something for the anniversary of this poetry book. So of course, here we are. And we are starting out with the basics. We are ripping up paper and starting our backgrounds because for some reason, that's my favorite thing to do, and I do think I should change it up sometimes, but I can't help it. Just, it looks so nice to have these shredded, almost, pieces of paper to start out with my background, and of course, I like to, use these bigger pages to create a non-plain background. I just think that white is great, but it can also just be too washy, and I didn't really want to go with too much white. So we are using a lot of tans, a lot of browns, and I'm saying this as I'm laying down white grid paper, so, The grid paper that I'm using actually is from Canva because I don't own any grid paper, so yeah, I just printed some off and ripped them up to use them. So that's, again, my favorite trick right now is just printing things off of Canva, like this house photo. Now, the photos that I did use from Canva, I tried to keep the color palette around white and green because green was going to be my only pop of color other than the soft pinks that I use in this palette. I wanted most things to be kind of just white, tan, pretty basic. But the house actually has meaning. So in the poetry book, there is a metaphorical house that represents the relationship, and as the relationship worsens, the house deteriorates, but in the end, it is overgrown with plants, which is why I end up putting down garden pictures later on, because the plants represent my personal growth and my new sense of love for myself despite the deterioration of that relationship. So that is why there are garden, house imagery items everywhere in this spread. Obviously, a light bulb also plays a big part in the story, hence why it's called The Lights Are On But Nobody's Home. But I didn't want to do a lot of light bulb designs, and I think the biggest reason is because when I made my January bullet journal spread, I just got burnt out on light bulbs. I drew so many light bulbs, and I didn't want to draw anymore, so. Oh, and my favorite thing about this spread in all honesty, are these little black and white pictures. They were hand drawn by my illustrator, Tessa McKenney. She is phenomenal. I love all the pictures that she did. Of course, I have some favorites like that hand with the dripping wax and the candles. I just really love it. But each picture sort of represents imagery from some of the poems, and you can find them in the poetry book itself. Of course, I have access to the photos as is, so I'm able to print them off and use them. So I kind of use them in place of stickers, since I didn't really want to use a lot of bright, colorful stickers for this one. I wanted it to be much more personal and relate as best as it can to the poetry book itself, since this is the 2-year anniversary of it being published. So that was my thought process behind that one. So here we are. One thing that I wanted to point out is I was kind of nervous to put down the words. So I walked into this wanting to put a poem on it, of course, and it took me a while to find the right poem that really captured what I wanted to go for this spread and how I wanted to honor the poetry book. So that was a little nerve-wracking for me. Also, you'll see here I have this little pink strip of paper. I really love layering right now in scrapbooking, and I think that the layering just adds more dimension, it adds more color and visual interest. So I love adding the different grid papers, different colored scrapbook papers, and again that little pink strip, just to kind of add more to the page and make it feel very layered. And then, of course, the words on top are another component of layering, which is super cool. And I really like those as well. I did kind of bunch them all together because I wasn't sure how to go about it, because I knew this is a really long poem. So they are kind of crammed, but we will fix that later. And if you are curious as to what this poem says, I'll go ahead and read it to you. I can't promise that I have a great poetry reading voice, but we'll try our best. So this is what the poem says. And just like that, I fell in love with words. I fell in love with the truths they wove, the people they wove, the humanity within them, within a sentence. I fell in love with every comma and every period. There was eloquence in the way they dripped off of simple tongues, and seduction in the gowns they twirled, flashing behind lowered lashes over a glass of wine. There was beauty in small smiles in the back of a coffee shop, in the moment before the needle lands on the record, and I fell for the poetry. Not hard. No, the ground didn't feel like rock anymore. I fell into the sky, somewhere between the stars, and my own humanity drove me. I was so small, a speck of existence. And I found that words were my true love, and that I could keep them, speak them, and kiss them in every moment, just as I could a lover. So that's the poem. It kind of represents how I fell in love with poetry, and I actually have another poem, not in the book, but another poem that I wrote in college when I fell out of love with poetry. So the two of them are very similar, but this one I think highlights that period of my life when I just, for 6 years I dedicated myself to poetry. I wrote so many poems, and then I published them in this book, and I think it highlights part of my writing journey, or my journey as a writer. And yes, now I spend more time journaling and writing for my freelance jobs and writing fiction, but I still really enjoy poetry, and it's something that it warms my little heart. At the bottom here, I am writing the 2021 anniversary, published in April 2019, just again as a memento to this whole spread. And then I'm going to start doodling, which is something I almost never do in my scrapbook spreads, but I thought that there was a lot of blank space left over and I wanted to fill it. So I started drawing these little plant doodles. They're not too complicated. They're not, perfect or anything, but I feel like they add a little bit more to the piece. And I went with plants again to represent growth, to represent change, and add a bit more vibrancy, even though it's black and white, but to add vibrancy and life to the page. I probably would have drawn light bulbs had I not been so burnt out on them, but I am happy with these little plant vines and doodles that I'm doing. I really like the little glass jar that I drew with the flowers in them, and then on the left hand side I end up drawing some flowers above one of the sentences, and I just think it works really well and adds more cohesiveness, I guess, to the entire thing, because there are these doodles that all tie in to the overall piece, and it just makes it feel more personal to me. So then I'm going to finalize it with a little bit of washi tape, and we'll be done.
Alright, so that was the quick rundown of the spread in progress, and I will do a flip through in a few moments, but first I wanted to go ahead and give a quick shout out to my illustrator Tessa McKenney. I don't know if she's watching this video or not, but we're giving a shout out to her anyway. She did all of the artwork inside the book. I did the cover, but she did everything else on the inside, and it turned out phenomenally. If you want to purchase this book, it is on Amazon for, I believe, $6.99, and you can find more details about that in the link in the description box below. But let's go ahead and get on to this final flip through.
Overall, I am really happy with how it turned out, and I feel like I say that for a lot of spreads, but I walked in really nervous for this one in particular because I'd never done strips of sentences before to create a whole poem. I wasn't really sure how to break it up and how to make it flow, but I do think that it turned out pretty well, and I'm really happy with how everything was placed. It feels as if I walked in with a plan, and I didn't. I did not know where I was going with it, but it was perfectly spaced out, and I'm really, really happy with it. I'm also really happy with the illustrations that Tessa drew, of course. I think they worked beautifully as little stickers, so yeah, this one goes down as one of my favorites, I think.
Alright, thank you again for watching today's video. I hope that you really enjoy the scrapbooking spreads and that they spark some sort of inspiration so you can make one on your own. If you want to see more content like this, please be sure to let me know, and don't forget to leave a comment down in the description box telling me what your thoughts are on poetry spreads, and if you want to see others, whether that be my own or other poetry spreads or other book themed ideas. So yeah, thank you again, and I will catch you next time.